It's got to be an interesting, curious kind of feeling for a particular athlete when they are competing against other athletes and they can tell the differences. Now, we've all had that experience at other levels, but I'm talking about at a high level of competition for a position. So we can conjecture to a certain degree that obviously Dillon Gabriel is entrenched as the starter. He's got a stranglehold on the job, most likely.
Mhm.
But if the recruiting rankings give us any indication, there are probably, whereas as you painted the picture of what it was last season of him thinking, okay, he can recognize the talent in the room or the lack thereof and know where he stands versus knowing, okay, I am the starter and I can play this position better than anyone, but wow, we're throwing various types of passes and maybe Jackson Arnold, maybe that comes out of his hand a little bit better and he can make that throw better than that particular throw or this throw, or maybe there's just a little bit more zip or distance, or there's just that's probably an interesting just dynamic to the competition or thought process that goes through what you would think to be a very highly confident athlete who's held down a starting spot at two programs over the last 3 or 4 years, but to see maybe somebody come in that can do some things that he can't.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting to watch, Mark, because it'll be a little bit different. I think that obviously Oklahoma's fans' first opportunity will be at the spring game to watch Jackson Arnold in person, and so I think, as you mentioned, I think that's very important, Mark. When you mention that those kind of intangibles, he's the Jackson Arnold is the prototypical guy. Like he's got a stronger arm. He's taller. He's probably a little bit quicker, a little bit more elusive. Runs the zone read probably a little bit better than Dillon Gabriel. So I think that the key is when that experience that Dillon Gabriel has that is far beyond obviously what Jackson Arnold has. The knowledge of the system is far beyond what happens when those two meet. What happens when you have a guy that has the talent of a Jackson Arnold, understands the offense, starts to get a little bit more experience, whether that's practice or whether that's in late in game situation. Where does that how does that reconcile with one another? Because we've seen in the past over some of these in some of these years, true freshmen that will maybe not necessarily be ready to start immediately as the season begins, but when you look midway through the season, we've seen a couple of situations where some of these quarterbacks have overtaken the incumbent. Trevor Lawrence is a guy that comes to mind where he started, midway through the season for Clemson a few years ago and led them to a national championship. So I think that will be the thing to kind of keep going. I mean, here we are, March 15th saying this, but I would be extremely surprised if Dillon Gabriel is not the starter for game one. However, we'll see if the things that Dillon Gabriel has struggled with a little bit this past year, if he improves on those enough to hold off on Jackson Arnold. And you talk about a guy, and it's always difficult, or maybe not difficult, but kind of an interesting proposition to talk about a kid that's never thrown a pass on the collegiate level. So you never know what that translation is going to be. There's been plenty of you know not miss quarterbacks that just haven't been able to put it together. So we don't know, but I think it's going to be one of those things that's going to be very intriguing to watch early on in camp, and then as the season progresses.
And it comes to mind that in past years, and certainly last off season, Jason and I put together a list of a much better list, but I certainly supplemented it with a list of position rankings in the Big 12. And maybe we'll do that again this summer going into August camp to see where Dillon Gabriel would stack up against Big 12 competition with four new teams coming into the league as well.